Welcome to the Knife Junkie podcast, your weekly dose of knife news and information about knives and knife collecting. Here's your host, Bob the Knife Junkie DeMarco.
Welcome to the Knife Junkie podcast. I'm Bob DeMarco. On this edition of the show, I'm speaking with Mike Wertin of Northern Knives. Mike, a longtime Thursday Night Knives contributor, is the proprietor of Northern Knives, Anchorage, Alaska's premier knife retailer and the largest full-service knife shop west of the Mississippi. Northern Knives not only sells a full roster of top knife brands, but also offers customization services, vintage pieces, pre-owned blades, and their very own brand of in-house handmade knives, offering 6 different models, hailed to be the toughest things in Alaska since bears. We'll catch up with Mike and find out everything about Northern Knives, but first be sure to like, comment, subscribe, hit the notification bell, and download the show to your favorite podcast app. Also, if you want to help support the show, you can do so by sending the show to a friend. That goes a long, long way. Or go to Patreon and check out what you stand to gain over there. Quickest way to do that is to head over to TheKnifeJunkie.com/Patreon. Again, that's TheKnifeJunkie.com/Patreon.
The Shockwave Tactical Torch is your ultimate self-defense companion, featuring a powerful LED bulb that lasts 100,000 hours, a super sharp crenulated bezel, and a built-in stun gun delivering 4.5 million volts. Don't settle for ordinary. Choose the Shockwave Tactical Torch. TheKnifeJunkie.com/Shockwave.
Mike, welcome to the Knife Junkie podcast, sir. It's a pleasure to have you.
Hey, thank you for having me. It's nice to be join in more than just comments on a Thursday.
Yeah, no doubt. And actually, some might remember you did come on a Thursday Night Knives, and we're giving away a Colorful Filth collaboration. We'll talk about
that was the Paul the Paul Munko Colorful Filth collaboration. We did the Demco, right? The Demco 80-20.5.
Yes. So if you're just listening, I got to say, Mike is coming to us from the Ultimate Man Cave. It's a really beautiful space. Before we started, he was zoomed out and we could see his full room full of cool, manly stuff. But yeah, really, really nice space there.
We do a live stream with a local guy up here, and he's a lot bigger channel than we are. And when we did it the first time from the studio, somebody called it Canadian Wayne's World. So that's our that's actually our Wi-Fi network down here is called Canadian Wayne's World.
Nice. So Mike, I sort of teed up Northern Knives, the shop, the retailer, etc. Before we get into that, tell me how you got into knives in the first place.
Well, professionally, I got into it back in like 2011. And it was a guy I grew up with back in Missouri. Him and his family moved up here to Alaska, and his father started Northern Knives. And he contacted me one day and said, my dad's thinking of retiring. Do you want to buy his half? And I said yes, and moved up here. And that's kind of where my professional career in knives started.
So were you always a knife type guy?
I always appreciated a good knife. I didn't have a big collection or anything, but the few things I did have some nice stuff. I had a few cool Japanese cold steel knives back in the day, and nice kitchen knives, things like that. I didn't carry like a $15 Home Depot special or anything like that.
Right. Okay. So going up to Alaska from Missouri, I've never been to Alaska, and it's been many, many years since I've been to Missouri, but they seem like, pretty different environs. What was that like?
Yeah, well, honestly, I didn't go from Missouri. I knew him while I was in Missouri, but I moved from there in '94 and moved to Phoenix in Arizona. So I lived there from '94 until 2011. And so I went from the desert in Arizona to the wilds of Alaska. And it was, my wife came with me too. She was born and raised, and she'd never even visited. And I had visited here a couple of times, but it really tests you to move and live here. You have to be committed to it.
Why?
Well, for the most part, just getting here is not easy unless you want to throw, tens of thousands of dollars at uprooting your life just to come up here. It's not an easy task. I basically had to sell off everything I owned that wouldn't fit on a 4x4 pallet. And then you can bring that, and then that's about it. You kind of have to start over to get up here.
So is it true? I mean, down here in the contiguous 48, people like to claim that people go to Alaska because they're running from something or running to something.
Yeah.
Would you say that's the case up there?
Yeah, up here we call it the 3Ms. So it's military, money, or mischief. So you're either running from the law, running to money, or your military moves you up here.
That's pretty good.
Yeah, it's a pretty common saying up here for sure.
So for you, it's money. We'll just say.
Yeah, for me it was money. It was it was risky, because you're just kind of jumping into, being your own boss at a certain point. But I was self-employed for most of my life. So it wasn't, and I thought I had kind of reached a point in my life in Arizona that I didn't like where, I just wanted to change. I didn't like where it was going.
Well, what line of work was that? Have you always been a businessman or?
Well, I was in the car business for many years. I worked at a wholesale dealership. So we didn't sell cars to people. We sold cars to other businesses. Like we sold cars to other dealerships.
Okay.
It's a job that really shouldn't exist, because basically what it is when you trade in a car, they would call somebody like me and ask me what I would buy it for them. What will you give me for this car? I'll give you 10 grand. So then they'll offer you 8. And then that car will sit there, and they refuse to sell it if they don't want it. They refuse to sell it to other dealerships because they all want to be in competition. So a middleman jumps in and buys it from one dealership and takes it to the other one.
Oh, wow. So what was the transition like going from that kind of work to, you moved up to Alaska? I know culturally that's a big change for you. But what was it like jumping into a knife business, especially one that was already going?
It was it was a lot of learning. It was especially like with a functional shop. There's a lot of stuff you have to learn that, you can't. The quality level of work has to be real high, because you're dealing with sometimes some very expensive stuff, and it's customers, and reviews are a thing. You have to be very cognizant of that. So it's like, I think I had a year of practice, so a couple hundred hours on the grinder before I could sharpen and work on customers' knives. It was just practice. And the business side of it, I was a little bit more familiar with that, so it was a little bit less of a learning curve. And then, but it was mainly it was mainly just the skill set, developing the skill set to be good enough to kind of carry your weight.
That's interesting, because you walked into a situation or bought into a situation that's not just a retailer of knives. You also make knives. You have a line of knives called 3 Dog Knife, which I love. Yeah. I like the name. I like the band from back in the day. But what was first? What came first?
3DK was actually developed, believe it or not, when I moved up here, about a year after I moved up here, we were being scouted for a reality television show.
Oh.
And so they bring out, producers and cameramen and sound guys, and they basically film a short episode. And in the run up to that, we wanted to kind of expand the knife, the shop part of it. So it's more exciting. You throw sparks and, things like that. It's just more things you can add. And so that kind of pushed us to add a couple of grinders and, add a heat treat oven and all this stuff so we could make them in-house, because that was part of the premise of the show. Because I don't know if anybody knows, but reality TV shows are basically fake. So they just make it all up and then you film it.
Yeah.
They just call it reality show so that you don't have to get a SAG card, and they don't have to pay you a decent wage.
Right.
That's the whole reason they call it. Yeah. So and then they shopped the show around, and it ended up not getting picked up, but we had already expanded, so we just kind of ran. Well, we kind of ran with it. It was something we wanted to do anyway. This was just the kind of the impetus that kind of pushed us. And so, because we always, it's always like you sell so many knives to people, and you hear the same complaints over and over. Well, what can I get one with this, and can I get one with this, and can I get one with this? And it's like, there's not a knife that has all 3 of those aspects. And so we kind of just were like, well, why don't we solve that problem first? So the main knife we made, that is basically the bread and butter, so to speak, of 3DK, is our hunting knife.
Okay.
It's called the Mac. But the knife we made before that was actually the Severance, so I designed it for a drug interdiction team in Hawaii.
Ooh.
And so what these guys do is they helicopter in to these illegal pot growing fields and they hack it all down and then they fly out. And so I made this kind of 18-inch recurve machete thing. And we designed it and made a whole bunch of them for them. And then we started making those, but they're difficult to make. They take a long time. You can't crank them out very fast. And so at the time, probably our best-selling hunting knife was the Fall Niven F1. And it's because it comes with a convex grind. It's big enough to do big game, but it's small enough to be manageable. But it only came with the rubber handle, and so everybody's like, well, I like the convex grind. I like the size, but can I get a moose handle? Can I get something other? Can I get an ivory handle? It's like, no, you can't. And so we kind of I took a little inspiration, we'll say, from the F1, and also from the Bravo one from Bark River.
Oh yeah.
And tried to make it at a price point that's easy for someone who's, not all hunters are knife guys,
Yeah.
So you got to make it at a price point that's like easy to swallow, and that was not something you could find up here in Alaska at the time.
That's pretty interesting. I mean, the concept of creating a service where you can listen to what customers are saying when it comes to buying a commercially produced knife. And I like X, Y, and Z, but can I just have it without the cheesy rubber handle? Not that the F1 is cheesy, but you know what I'm saying.
Yeah.
But
it's a great knife. It's a great knife. It's just, like I said, it's not. It doesn't feel special when you come up here, and people want something they buy in Alaska. They want it to feel special, and a rubber-handled F1 is not that.
So now, who was leading the charge in terms of actually making the knives? Was someone, or was it you, or was there someone else already grinding stuff?
No, we actually brought in a guy for the show to make them on the show. His name was Don. He's a maker up here, and we brought him in. I did all the we brought in a CNC. I brought in a maker, and so I would do all the machining. So I would do machining out the blanks and everything, because profiling, it was consistency is what we were looking for and trying to streamline the process. Right. So if you cut the blanks on a CNC and then you cut the handles on a CNC, they basically are within fraction of a millimeter of fitting right up. So minimal finish work. You just got to take the marks out of the spine where the either the laser or the water jet cuts it.
Right.
And then it's it just makes it takes, basically you just try to figure out all the bottlenecks of making a knife, and then you one by one take out, okay, what's our biggest bottleneck, and then you solve that one, and then another one pops up, and then it's like, okay, so, and then you basically get it down to where you can make a custom, but you don't have to charge someone $700 for it. You can basically sell them what in essence becomes a mid-tech knife, but you get, but every single one, like I'm still to this day, almost every single 3DK knife that's ever been produced has been hand sharpened by me.
Wow.
And so, and it's like, I think there's maybe a couple that haven't been, but maybe it was my day off or something, and it's, but trying to make a consistent product, because and that's the thing too, is like, if you want to be competitive in knives, a lifetime warranty is a given. You have to have that. And since, we don't have like a parts bin where you just swap out parts, like we have to sit and custom fix, or anything that goes wrong with it, we have to take care of it. And you don't want to go spend all your time going back over work you've already done. So it's basically making the toughest thing that you possibly can. And that's where we kind of came, I came up with the toughest thing out of Alaska since bears, kind of as a joke that we put on the website, like probably 9 or 10 years ago, something like that. And we never really had a slogan or anything. So we just kind of default to that. But that's the point, is like, I don't want to bash anybody else's product, but like, we use, so here's a Severance, like, right. So that's the Severance.
Oh, that is so cool. And
it's all titanium. So you can lash it to a pole. That's why all the titanium pins are all pass through, right? But like if you take a bussy, and they use the same kind of method, but they use steel. We use titanium because there's lots of salt water in Alaska. Uh-huh. But if you drill out those barrels on a bussy, the handles come off, and ours don't. So we can take ours. You can drill all the titanium out of it, and it'll still take a chisel to get the handle off of the blade. And we do that. we do that on purpose. It's the whole point is to make it so inconceivably tough that if you can manage to damage it, you will probably also get damaged too.
But can you hold that back up, Mike, so we can
Yeah.
take a look at it? So are you saying that the handle itself is like epoxied on or something like that? And then
Yeah, it's we don't really discuss how we do it,
Okay.
but in essence, yes. But epoxy, no, and I'll tell you the reason why is because epoxy is messy and slow and it gets everywhere and it adds a lot to the workload. So you
Okay.
have to find a way to streamline that process so that you can do, there's days where I would just spend all day with piles of these G10 handles that I had spent the week machining, and it's applying the special kind of adhesive that we use, and it's just all day. You just put on headphones and sit in the workshop and just apply this kind of adhesive that we use on our handles, and so that we try to batch everything. So it's like, if you're only doing one task in the day, yes, it's boring, but you get very good at it and you make very few mistakes, and it allows us to make the knife faster and cheaper without having to sacrifice any quality in the overall product. If we can do something, and the process gets faster and cheaper, and the overall end product does not change, that's the number one criteria. If the end product does not change, then we'll do it. And we've only had to raise our prices one time in 13 years.
And our warranty actually states, I'm the ethereal ghost. Our warranty actually states that if you manage to break it, we really want a soundbite from you, because it's just an awesome story to put on a warranty, because you did something that either one, it catastrophically failed and hurt you because you were putting it way beyond the limits, or two, you were defending yourself. And both of those are great stories that we want to hear.
Yeah. We have very, very few warranty claims. We had an amok that a friend of ours is a fire jumper, and he stuck it in a tree and then had to evacuate. And so it went through a forest fire. He actually went back and was able to find it. And, the handles are all melted off and everything. And luckily there was enough carbon left in it that we were able to reheat treat it. And so we completely redid that one, made him a one-off.
No way.
And but other than that, it's all little stuff. Like the fillets, since they go through a lot of salt water and a lot of abuse, and they're in water all the time, we get some handles pulling away, but it's all warranty stuff we cover. But Max, I've never had a severance come back for warranty. I've never had an amok come back for warranty. I don't think I've ever had a riot come back for warranty. And Max, occasionally here and there, maybe 3 over the last couple of years. Maybe over the last 8 years.
The Mac is your EDC kind of fixed blade?
Yeah, that's the one we sell the most of. That's our hunting knife. Basically, it's like I said, overall size is about the size of a Fall Niven F1. It looks a little more akin to, like I said, a Bravo 1, but. Yeah.
So you designed the severance, you said, for a drug interdiction in Hawaii, was it?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
That's
we had a
pretty
friend
interesting. You're up there in Alaska, and you're designing a knife for work in Hawaii. How different did you have to consider the materials and that kind of thing?
Not much, to be honest, not much, because of what they wanted it for. So you do a lot of bushwhacking in Alaska. It's not uncommon for somebody to own a couple of machetes up here. So I'm just making a nicer, more durable, more efficient machete. It was surprisingly not different. In fact, I used my severance to trim the trees in my front yard that hung over the sidewalk.
Okay, so we're talking about actually 2 environments that have a lot of salt water, have a lot of moisture in general, I would imagine. So
yeah, and a lot of brush, a lot of growth. So
yeah,
it was because they were so specific in what they were doing. It was surprising. It was shockingly similar.
One more time, hold up that severance, and I want to ask you about the pommel. You have a large amount of blade tang on the pommel extending, and that looks kind of combative. What was that for?
Yeah, so that was for it was if the helicopter goes down, it was to kind of, let's say, attack the fuselage if they needed to.
I got you.
Or something like that. Also, it serves as a counterweight. So it helps stop fatigue. So when you're swinging this all day, a little bit of weight out the ass helps stop with fatigue. So it gives it more balance. So you're not trying to stop and start this blade out front. You've got a little counterweight,
Yeah.
and it helps. It helps if you're going to be doing it all day.
Similar to like an old school, like a broadsword, where it has a big
Yeah.
heavy pommel, and you can.
Exactly. Yeah. Exactly.
Oh, that's cool. That's cool. And then the point to sort of smash glass or whatever the canopy is to get yourself out of a crash.
Yeah.
Helicopter.
Exactly. Yeah.
So
that
you
was
mentioned.
that request. So, I mean, they had some things. They had some points they wanted me to hit, and then I just tried to find a design that would satisfy what they needed, but also look good. You know, I didn't want. It's got my name on it. I don't want it to look like shit.
Yeah, it's got to look good. So you mentioned the amok before, and that's I watched a review that was actually linked from your website from a hunter up there in Alaska talking about it. But do you have an amok handy? I have a feeling this is kind of one of your flagships.
I think we did. I think Dakota's looking for one right now. I think we might have one here off camera.
So it's an unlikely outdoors knife. It looks to me like a fighting knife, maybe a little bit beefier than a fighting knife, but it's kind of like a recurved tanto almost.
Yeah.
Tell me about this design.
So that's the amok. You can see it has a strike saw across the top, like a kind of a stylized version of what would be on the Tom Brown tracker. The recurve tanto, it's just something that I really like, and it's become kind of a design language that we've adopted. This was the first knife that I actually took no criticisms on. Like, it was always like when I did the Severance, you're working with guys, so it's always like, okay, here's 5 or 6 different handles. We'll make prototypes don't make them out, full knives. We make prototypes, and it's like, how does this feel in the hand? Get everybody's input. And we do that with everything. There was a couple iterations of the Mac that we went through, and I changed the front, the hilt a couple of times before we settled on one. It was always like, what do you think? What do you think? But the amok was the first one that I had in my head that it was like, I don't care what anybody else thinks. I'm going to make it for me. And so that's where that one came from, really.
So on the spine, you called it a strike saw. What is that?
Yeah. So like if you wanted to cut through something larger, right? And instead of just hacking at it with your blade and dulling it, you flip it around and you would rake it, and it would remove material without dulling the edge of the knife. That's what the back of a Tom Brown tracker is. It's the strike saw. Theirs is just a bit more aggressive.
Okay, is that for? Would you use that for bone or something? I'm not a hunter, though. I'd like to.
I personally wouldn't. I wouldn't really go through bone in the field necessarily. Maybe butchering, but generally you take it apart at the joints just because it's the point of least resistance.
Okay, all right.
That's another thing that we try to make our knives, a little thicker and a little tougher than they generally need to be. So, a lot of times, because if you want to pry a moose shoulder apart, it's not easy work. So you need something tough.
I can imagine those dams are huge.
Yeah. Dakota, are you chiming in again?
Sorry, the strike saw is more for like limbing trees. So it's designed to slowly wear away at the fibers and like a green sapling or something like that. So if you're in a survival situation, you can easily get stakes and poles and etc. to build shelter for whatever you're doing without sacrificing your razor sharp edge.
Don't say razor sharp. Don't say razor sharp.
Working sharp edge. It's a realistic sharp edge.
Razors don't so quickly. Don't say razor sharp.
So what is it about the recurve tanto that you like so much? I mean, obviously it looks wicked, but
well, for the Severance specifically, it's the same thought as a kukri. It's called like a 200% cut. So if you hit something like this, there's not a lot of resistance to it slipping off the blades. You don't get a lot of damage done, but when you go this, it has to go down. It has to go down and crest turn the corner. So you get a lot more cut per swing out of it generally. So it makes it a good working design. It makes it terrible having to resharpen, but we sharpen them free for life. So I don't generally apologize for that.
So first of all, that's really nice that you sharpen for life. But I have a little pet peeve, and that is people who don't like recurves because they're hard to sharpen, because really they're not. If you have the right tool, if you're working with a stone that's 5 inches wide, it's going to be difficult. But if you get a rod or something that's a little more thin, they're no more difficult to sharpen than anything else. I'm a huge recurve fan, and the recurve Tonto to me is especially cool because it's kind of a combination of a couple of different blades. And but I really don't think it's a murderous to resharpen.
And I agree, which is why I have 3 knives with this recurve Tonto on it, and but that's another thing too is I don't use a stone. I use a ceramic rod when I sharpen these, and I don't find it difficult. But I will say, I did fold to peer pressure, and so our folder prototypes, the Tonto variant, does not have a recurve on it.
Wait. So I did not know that you were working on folders.
Yeah.
Do you have anything handy you could show off, or is this?
No, I don't. Unfortunately, no, I don't. I have a plexiglass model of it. Is all I have. I'm waiting to get. So in Alaska, we have to outsource a bit more than a lot of places do, like heat treat. I have a heat treat oven that fits a dozen knives, and I don't know anybody personally up here who has a larger one. But for the kind of volume we do, that would mean that I would have to do a heat treat cycle almost every single day, which is, I don't know if you've ever heat treated knives, but heat treating a dozen knives every day is terrible work. It'll so we have to send it down to the lower 48 because that's the only place we can get it done. Okay. And so, but then when you do that, it's like there's restrictions on what you can get done. You got to worry about, like I have to randomly Rockwell everything when it comes back. I have to take batches and randomly Rockwell it to make sure that we're getting consistent product and making sure we're staying on top of it. And there's also minimums. I have to send 200 blanks to be able for them to even talk to me. Otherwise it's like if you don't meet the minimum, they just won't do it. Here's the minimum. We have no shortage of people who will meet that minimum. Bye, kid. Whatever.
Yeah, and a lot of those places or the big places aren't just heat treating knives; they're heat treating, blades for turbine engines and all sorts of other crap. So they could probably say no to the knife industry without any pain.
Yeah, exactly. The guy who does our heat treat, I had to sign an NDA to tour his facility because there was 2 different blades there, folder blades, from very famous makers, and I really wish I could tell you, but they're staggeringly popular knives that were at this guy's facility. Oh, and wow. So once I saw that, I was like, oh, okay, we'll use this guy.
Yeah. Oh, that's cool. Well, that's a great endorsement. You see a staggeringly famous knife maker.
I'll say this: the 2 blades I saw, of each of those knives, I've owned no less than 4 of one and 2 or 3 of the other. If I said the names to you right now, I wouldn't even have to tell you the maker. You just know. I've
personally owned 2 so far of one of them, I believe, and I'm not a knife snob. Like, it's ubiquitous.
So yeah, and on Thursday Night Knives, you usually chime in during the pocket check, and you're always carrying something sweet. So I'm starting to do the math, and I think I'm not going to say what I think it is, but maybe after we stop rolling, I'll ask. But
off camera, I'll tell you.
Yeah. But that's really cool and encouraging, I'm sure, when you're outsourcing your work to someone, because ultimately, like you said, it's coming back. You're putting your name on it, and you want to make sure that it's it's good to go. So you not only sell and you not only make and sell 3 Dog knives, you have a really awesome catalog of knives that you sell. When you started in 2011 up there, was that catalog already built up, or did you? How did that work?
To a certain extent, I've expanded the shop a little bit. I've probably expanded the retail floor by 50% since then, and the workshop I've expanded by like 4 or 5 fold. We're basically limited it out in our building right now, and we've added a few. Like, we were a Chris Reeve dealer. Well, not anymore, but we added Chris Reeve, we added Hinderer, we added Microtech, but we were a pretty big Benchmade dealer even at the time. I remember at certain points Benchmade would be 20% of our gross sales for the year would be strictly Benchmade. But we always did, you know, there's certain brands I've tried. I was big into ZTs kind of back in the day, not so much anymore, but
Yeah.
when they switched to S35, they lost me. But I've tried and tried. Like I even had my Kershaw rep just happens to be, she's not even a rep. She just happens to be the lady that answered the phone when I called down there one day, and so she just ended up being my rep. I had a ZT rep come in the store one time, and I have all of our display boards where all of our folding knives are. We have company logos painted in behind them, and there's one with a ZT section that has like 3 or 4 shelves. And I just told him, I said, I want to fill these shelves. Like let's go. And like just ghosted me. Never heard back. So it's kind of weird being Alaska. We get some people who are really excited to work with us and work with this state and come up here. And other people are just like, it's Alaska. We don't need them.
Yeah, Alaska, not too big. No one uses knives up there. Like, why?
Yeah.
I don't know why you would turn your back on Alaska. I mean, I get it. It's far away. But A, what a great excuse to go up to a beautiful place. And B, I would imagine, I mean, in my imagination anyway, everyone up in Alaska has and needs and uses knives.
It's actually odd when you meet someone that either doesn't have or has some kind of an aversion to a pocket knife. It's really uncommon up here. Like I mean, just about, well, I mean, I could say everybody I know, but that's a stupid statement because of the world that I live in. But
right.
I mean, just any regular old person, like just the amount of people who want to come in and buy a knife, but it's like, oh, but I kind of need it a little understated because when I go to work, they just carry a pocket knife in the office. When I lived in Phoenix, that wasn't a thing.
Yeah. I've been working my damnedest to make that a thing where I am. And I am in the most domesticated part of the country. So I've been working hard and I've made a lot of knife junkies around me. I've created people around me who like the knives. And so, well, in terms of the knives you sell, you mentioned Benchmade, huge. Benchmade is just huge in general, especially among law enforcement and military. And I like Benchmade enough. I like them because they're an American company, and I like a couple of their knives. Like I love the Bug Out and the Sibbert designs I love, and there's some great knives from them. But in general, they leave me a little bit cold. And I always felt like if those military people and those law enforcement, especially who seem to love Benchmade, just had their eyes opened to other brands, they might think, well, Benchmade's great, but so are these. Yeah. What do you think those brands might be?
Generally, someone who comes in and specifically is looking for a Benchmade, A, has either owned them for many years, or B, has like a cursory knowledge of good knives, and that's the most popular one. I mean, it's the largest American knife company, so it's the one that everybody knows. I mean, they run commercials during football games, for Christ's sake, But to be honest, moving people over from I move people over to, well, anymore, the new manual stuff that Microtech is doing, and for the price point you can get it for. I mean, it's like, here's a mini Bug Out for $170.
Preach.
And here's an MSI for $177. That has, I mean, they both polymer handle, but if you lay those two knives on the counter, like, it is, unless size is a major consideration, nobody picks the Bug Out. The stuff from Microtech has been. I'm not sure. I'm almost curious as if they're doing a little bit of like not necessarily losing money on some of their manual stuff, but they're eating a little bit of their margin a bit just to hit that really impressive price point, and especially the M390 MK they're using is been. I did not, I just thought, okay, M390 MK, it's a marketing thing. It's impressive. It really is. I've had really good experience with it. I've had 3 knives with M390 MK so far. 4.
What's the difference?
I don't know. They won't tell you. It's kind of like, that's part of it.
part of
They
their
don't say what their special formulation is.
Some university with a spectrometer has to be willing to throw a blade in there and have it vaporized to see
Yeah.
what the difference is.
Oh, okay. All right. Yeah, I mean, I'm with you. The amphibian and the stitch are two of my absolute
Yeah.
favorites. And I got them, I guess 2023, the end of 2023, or maybe early 2024. Man, I love those knives. And I want to love the MSI. I just don't like, I'm not crazy about the blade, but I love that it exists. I love it like, the redheaded stepchild. But it's just not my personal favorite. But I love that it's also being sold, like you said, at Spyderco Benchmade prices, because before that, you couldn't get a Microtech under $350 or something like that.
Yeah, and especially Benchmade, they did a pricing structure across all dealers. There was a pricing structure change in the way they formulated it. So as of January this year, it was always Benchmade has a wholesale cost, then they have a MAP, a minimum advertised price. You are not allowed to have a Benchmade on your website for less than X amount of dollars. That's why you see all those websites do the add to cart to see your real price, because that's technically not an advertised price. And then you would go to Benchmade and you would have MSRP, manufacturer suggested retail price, which is generally 18 to 20% above what the MAP price would be. So it was basically so that Benchmade Direct doesn't compete with their dealers. You get it from a dealer for 180, you get it from Benchmade for 200. Well, they did away with that in January. So instead of bringing MSRP down to MAP, they brought all MAP prices up to MSRP. So most Benchmade knives went through an almost 20% price increase in January. Which I don't know. And I don't know how aware people are of that yet, but it's going to start, as time goes on, people start realizing that Benchmade pricing is now normalized across all of their dealers and across their home website.
Since I don't pay too much attention to Benchmade, I didn't really necessarily notice that. But when new models come out, at the new model year, I remember last year actually thinking like, damn, prices have really gone up. And they released that titanium,
The Narrows.
The all titanium one.
Oh my God, it was so expensive. I couldn't believe it. It was like
over 500 MAP.
Yeah, 520, I think.
It's 520
Yeah,
MAP. MSRP was almost 600.
Yeah, the new PSK. They just came out with the new PSK. I think it's in the same range. I don't remember exactly.
But you can still get the Grivery Crew Wear Shootout for around $300.
Yeah.
So like they still have some SKUs that make sense.
Some had a massive price increase and some didn't.
Insane.
Wow. Yeah. I mean, so even to the casual observer, I noticed that. What are some of the brands that you love besides Microtech, and what are the ones that you carry? I see that you have half-face blades. I'm very interested in them.
Andy is the owner of Half Face. He's a really cool guy. He comes up to Alaska quite often. He does a moose hunt almost every year, but he's a guy. He doesn't have very many dealers. There's not a lot of us. There's probably only about 4, I think. But and his stuff is so sought after. It's not exactly easy to get, even being a dealer. It's not like I have some kind of special access. It's like Lori knows him, my business partner, Lori. She knows him better than I do. And it's not like we get some kind of special, access to anything. It's basically, here's a promo code that basically my promo code gets me wholesale cost off anything I want to buy, but I got to fight it out with everybody else on the website. Like I don't get advanced anything. We don't get special nothing. In fact, we're doing a kind of a half collab with him right now to do a bunch of customs for that we will be the only ones that'll have access to. So what we did is we sent him down like probably 60 or 70 pounds of like ivory and whalebone and caribou, reindeer, and a bunch of Alaskan stuff, stellar sea cow, walrus jawbone, all that kind of stuff that we use. Some nice and so we'll get a custom line out of that, and that'll be the only thing. But other than that, it's fun stuff to get when you can get it.
He's the perfect guy to send that stuff to because his handles and his use of natural materials is so refined. I love
Yeah.
I love the way I love his handles basically.
Yeah. It's
Uh,
not something we would have considered doing with just about anybody else, except for him.
So you mentioned collaborations. This one with Half Face Blades. You've done others. We mentioned it right up front with Paul Munko and Colorful Filth. I was about to say
Yeah.
dirty, filthy designs. Colorful Filth designs.
You would be thrilled about that description.
Yeah.
People, when he was a teenager, people called his art "colorful filth," and that became his moniker.
That's why
going
it's stuck.
forward.
Yeah.
He's such a great guy, and his stuff is beautiful. So what's it like working with him, and what is it like in general doing these kind of collaborations?
He's great to work with. I mean, he's he's professional. He knows what he's doing. He's very thorough. He overproduces. And like
What
I'm
do you mean
always real I'm always real careful to not give artists pointers. Like it's like, oh, draw me this. Yeah, it's not how artists work. You know what I mean? It's like
Yeah.
I'm kind of thinking something like this kind of theme or possibility and like just run with it. You know what I mean? And like when it comes back, when I'm like, well, I don't like this, change that. It's like he's the artist. We're not, so he's great to work with. I always like his designs. He tries, you can tell he puts a lot of effort and thought into all the things he does. And I like that about him. It's fun to work with somebody like that.
You were generous enough to send us here at the Knife Junkie podcast an all titanium Demco 80 20.5 with his really cool artwork. It looked like kind of 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea, like early 20th century sci-fi illustration on it, all with an menacing underwater theme. It was so cool. And then also the pry bar that we gave away that time also. Do you guys up there at Northern Knives do all the anodizing?
Yeah, so Lori does all the Cerakote work and I do all the anodizing. And so it's basically there's some other people, it's taken a while, but there's some other people doing it now. So somebody else, because I will give little hints and drop little nuggets about how I do it, but nobody else was doing it. And so it's like, I don't care if somebody else does it, but I had to figure it out. So you got to figure it out yourself. So there's a couple other guys who have figured it out now. And there's a couple other people who are doing it. I think there's a guy out of Michigan who's doing it now too, but.
So what exactly are you saying? I'm sorry. Figured out how to anodize in such a way that you're actually drawing a picture?
Exactly. Because the method before I started using a laser, the method before was vinyl tape. So you use a vinyl tape plotter and you cut out a design and then you stick it to whatever you're anodizing and then you anodize it and then you peel the tape off and then you re-anodize it and whatever was under the tape will anodize a different color. And so what I developed a way to you split the color into all the different colors of the titanium anodizing spectrum, which ranges from 10 volts to basically 115 volts. And some colors repeat. And what I do is you take the highest number first and you anodize everything in the picture that's that color. Then you go to the next step and you remove the next color, only the part of the picture that you want that is the next color down the voltage spectrum, and you remove everything that's going to be that color. You put it back in the bath, and anything higher than that voltage won't be affected. Only what's lower than that voltage. So if say you wanted to do something blue, but you wanted the middle of it to be pink. So what you do is you do the whole thing, then you make it blue, then you put it on the laser and you remove the part that you want to be pink and you put it back in the bath and you change the voltage and there you go. Now you have a 2-color picture. And before you had to do that with vinyl, and it was doing the stuff that's as intricate as we do. Like, I mean, when I do my stuff, those stupid engineering lights that are basically like a circular light and you have the magnifying glass in the middle.
Yes, got one right here. Yeah.
Okay, yeah. So basically what I do is when we do the prototypes is, I'll do one run. I'll do like the first layer and then you anodize it. And then I'll do a second layer. And, usually our pictures are anywhere from 5 to 16 layers, depending. And then I'll take it and you go underneath that and you check out all the little, because the amount of detail he puts into it is more than I can produce. And the tolerances on the laser, and just the fact that you're burning it off, it has a certain amount of splay to it. So it's not as accurate as you really want it to be.
Right.
And so I'll take it and I will just tweak little settings. There's a setting on there that it is literally, I'm adjusting a tenth or a hundredth of a millimeter at a time. And I will just dial it in to where I can get the amount of detail that I think is justifiable for the amount of work you put into it. And then at what point is it, it's diminishing returns, right? And so I always want to make sure to do as much as I can to preserve all the work he put into it. But at a certain point, it's like I either can't do it or it just wouldn't, or it'll add so much to the time, because it's like so when you change one little thing, so it's like, okay, I want to change this screw from, normally it's black, but let's make it titanium and let's make it green. Okay, we can do that. But over the course of an entire project, that has now added 2 days of work. That is nothing but changing the color on one screw. That's going to take me 2 days to do that over the course of an entire project. So you have to kind of pick your battles, because that also adds, now you have to pay somebody for 2 days, and generally it's me, to anodize 350 screws. That's a pain in the butt, and so it drives the cost up. And we always try to keep these as cheap as we possibly can, just because I don't want them to be something that I want everybody that is willing to spend a reasonable amount of money on a good knife can attain, can get. You know what I mean? It's like
attainable,
attainable,
unobtainium.
Yeah. So it's like I kind of consider a hinderer the breaking point, right? $425 is pretty easily attainable hinderer money, and good, knife guys, which, let's be honest, most of the people who are buying these prototypes are knife guys, girls too. And those people will spend $425 on a hinderer. Okay, so that's the bar. So now try to come in as low under that as possible, and then it just makes it easier and easier.
It also sounds like you're taking, when we're talking about these sort of pictorial anodizing projects on knives, I'm presuming that you're scaling things down too. You're taking a larger detailed illustration and shrinking it down to fit onto a knife handle. Right. And there's going to be a bunch of detail you're going to lose. This whole process reminds me of old school intaglio color printmaking. When they would make a big book and they would have, illustrations at the beginning of each chapter, color printing was difficult, and they would have to run the zinc plate over and over with the different colors and then build it up. I think that's how they used to do comic books way back in the day.
Yeah. So actually, if my first job when I was in middle school, I used to ride my skateboard to a print shop, and I would, take out the trash and that kind of stuff. And so it was a physical print shop with massive printers. And I don't know if on physical printing like that, they have tick marks in the corners, and that's how you line them up. And I use those tick marks on all of the masking pictures, so that's how I line up all the anodizing. Because once you make all the layers, right, but then you have to warp them and change them to get them to fit the knife design, and you can't do it all, and then you have to stack them, and they have to be. I mean, it's amazing. I never really realized how small of a difference the human eye can pick up. You think it's off by a tenth of a millimeter, nobody will notice. Yes, they were 100% will notice that. Like a tenth of a millimeter is huge. Like if this is supposed to be orange and this is supposed to be blue, and you have a little green line down the middle, everybody sees that. And everybody's, so it's like you have to scrap entire ones because it was off. Visually, you'd never be able to know, seeing that it was off. But once you run that color, it's like how precise you have to be. And so like I have to use all these alignment marks on the outside edges of the images to make sure they're all lined up perfectly, to make sure that there's no tenth of a millimeter off, and a little bit of green shows through here and a little bit of pink shows through here. It's sometimes it's infuriating.
I bet. But like you said, you got to stay true to the artwork, and you have to do it justice, so it's worth that work. Let me ask you, you also do sort of customizing there, right? I mean,
Yeah.
you mentioned Lori
Yeah, Lori.
does Cerakoting. So does
Yeah,
this mean that someone
she's,
can bring their knife to you and you can make it special for them?
for sure, we do it. I mean, in fact, I'm going down to Oregon in a couple of weeks to be Cerakote certified as well, because our Cerakote is just it's always so busy, it's never caught up. It's kind of the same thing with all of our laser stuff too. So yeah, Cerakoting is it's like powder coating, but it's lower heat, and it's the tolerances are much like you could do. The reason you can't powder coat a gun slide is because powder coat is so thick, the tolerances won't work and it won't cycle.
Right.
It's not the case with Cerakote. Cerakote is real thin, and it's got a ceramic powder embedded in it, so it's really tough. I mean, to the point where and it's real. You can do so much with it. Like a thing that I like. What's that?
It's like
What's that?
slicker and smoother to the
Yeah,
touch.
it is. Yeah, it is. I like to tell people that you can do such fine work with Cerakote. You could literally Cerakote a piece of paper. Like that's how low temp and fine you can get it to be.
Wow. So this is a big part of your customizing services and your.
Yeah, we initially, so just like everything else, we initially started it with the reason we even bought a laser is because there used to be this thing when makers would when you put your logo on a knife, you have these little transparencies they used to use on overhead projectors when old people like me were in school, right?
Yeah.
And you would take this and you would tape it to your knife, and then you would take this a little electrical buzzing thing, and you dip it in a solution, and you put it on there, and it would only burn the part that's clear on this transparency, and that would burn your logo into the knife. But sometimes it would leak, and it would get in other places, and you'd have to, then you got blemishes on knives. And so I thought, all right, well, I don't know anything about lasers, but I can get this laser for $3,000. And I can build a jig and we can put our name on our knives, but we're kind of rolling the dice. And so I was like, okay, well, let's try it, because I'm sick of screwing up knives with this. And it's the last thing you're doing is putting the logo on. It's almost done.
Yes.
Yeah.
I've tried that.
You have this beautiful knife you spent all this time on, and now it's got a blemish on the blade, and you're like, son of a bitch. So we bought this laser, and now we had to buy a second one. And it's there's probably 8 or 9 jobs up that need to be onto the laser right now. And we didn't want to do, we had a local engraver that messed up a couple of our jobs. And I was like, hey, a second thing is if we want to do our own engraving, we don't have to worry about them messing it up. And now we have nonstop engraving jobs. And it was the same thing with Cerakote. I would like to do some black blades. Let's have some black bladed knives. We did my buddy Mark. So all these books are all written by Mark. He has a, what's up? Yeah, Mark Cameron. Right. I mean, it's all over the books. Mark Cameron. Anyway, so the Severance is in this book, and I believe this book, and then the Riot is in the rest of them. And I think the Mac is in these 4. I think he actually kills a guy with a Mac in that one. Anyway, I'm getting away from myself, but now I lost track of where I was going.
Well, you said black blades.
Oh yeah, so we wanted to do black blades, and then I was like, since the main character carries a Riot in one of these, we can do a black Cerakoted blade. We can do a limited edition. It's called the Jericho Quinn edition, and we can sell that. And it's like, just because we wanted to do our own stuff. And it's like, Cerakote it's not something, I mean, you could probably teach yourself over YouTube, but it's not a good idea. And Cerakote it's not expensive, to be honest. I think for 2 people, it's $1,700, but it's like, your certification is for life. It's a one-time fee. And so I was like, hey, Lori, you want to go? If you go get Cerakote certified, we can do black blades. That'll be cool. We'll be just like ZT. And so we got it for our own stuff. And now it's like, we have so many Cerakoting jobs. There's probably, without exaggeration, easily 30 to 35 jobs just sitting off camera waiting to be done. And it's just Lori, and she, we have limited time. And so I'm going down to get certified here in a couple of weeks so that I can help, so we can get caught up.
Nice. Well, before I let you go, I want to find out what what you have in the offing, or what kind of designs, specifically 3-dog knife designs, you're thinking of in the future? What kind of stuff are you looking to create that you haven't made yet?
Yeah, so the folder is what we're working on now, but like I said, there's some stuff has to be outsourced. And so I had a machinist up here because I'm a machinist, but I am a shade tree machinist. So I'm not making that kind of like intricate stuff. So had a guy I was working with, it kind of fell through. So I have a guy making me some parts in the lower 48 that I can't make. So we're just waiting on those to show up for prototypes. So then the folders will come. But I've got, so as far as folder designs, I have 9 folder designs completed. We are trying to launch number 1 right now, but it'll be prototyping. It's the same thing we do with all of our knives. We build prototypes. We're going to beat the shit out of them for a while and find out if there's any problems. And then if we all approve, then we'll move on with those.
What is the magical steel you're going to use for prototypes?
So our prototypes will be CPM S125V, which was, they stopped making that a long time ago. Now you can get Russian knockoffs of it, but I have actual 125V from Crucible. And so our 10 prototypes will all be CPM 125V.
Wow. All right. So I know that you don't have them to show, but what is the overriding philosophy, or if you can describe the designs?
So overall length open is almost identical to a Shaman, which I only know that because I found out afterwards. I got to, when you're designing something, there's no excuse. There's no excuse for not having it in your hand. There's no substitution. And so it's like I got to figure out the overall length and then go out onto the retail floor and find something. So overall length is about the size of the Shaman. It uses a similar design language as you can see in a lot of my knives, as they have a very pronounced hilt. It's simplicity. So internal stop pin, so there's no visible stop pin in the back. I want it to look incredibly like elegantly simple design on the outside, but not sacrifice a lot of the other things that I think it should have. So I have the luxury of having thousands of knives upstairs at my disposal. And so I can go through all the little things that I think every knife should have, but you can't get them on one knife. Same thing we did with the hunting knife. And so to the point where it won't double clutch. So when you break the blade and go to drop, it will drop the whole way without double clutching on the detent ball.
So we're talking about a frame lock then? Yeah,
frame lock. Ceramic bearings, metal guides in the titanium, so it's smoother. Nice. It's flipper titanium frame lock, but 3 blade shapes: drop point, Tonto, Wharncliffe. Everything is identical except for if you want a Wharncliffe blade, you have to swap out the backspacer.
Okay, that makes sense. Probably a straight backspacer as opposed to a curved one.
And only so. Like I could have done it the other way, but it just makes the blade shorter, and then that's inefficiency really bothers me. And so it's like, it's little things you never think of. But when you're doing like a folders get to be very expensive, and I don't want the market doesn't need another $700 folder. The market needs. You know what I mean? The market needs a tough knife that's been well thought out that you can sell for $399, which is exactly what ours is going to go for. And it's picked that price on purpose. It's because there's 2 breaking points with tourists I've noticed over the years. One is $400, the other is $600. So at $400 and over, you lose about 75% of people. And then over $600, you lose about 90% of who's left. So over $700 is a very small percentage of the population that will pay that kind of money. But if you can get basically one of only 2 folders made in Alaska, the other one is $950 and you can never get one. And then there's ours for $400. It's I think for what we're offering, I mean, it's $25 less than a Hinderer. It'll be nearly the same thickness. It'll be, titanium lock point, titanium show side, just like a Chris Reeve. And so it'll, like I said, I've taken all the things I like about all my favorite knives over the years, and I've tried to incorporate them all into this one knife because A, it's going to have my name on it, and 2, I mean, I'm going to be carrying it, so it better be something that I want, better be something that I like, and I'm spoiled. I can have, like I said, my collection is a 3,000 square foot retail store.
Well, hopefully when these come out, 2 things. Hopefully you'll come on Thursday Night Knives or back on this show and show them off and talk about them and I'll help you get people excited about them. They sound awesome.
Appreciate that.
But also, I'm already thinking of a special edition with some of that walrus tooth or those exotic materials that you sent to Half Face Blades.
I have a design that allows for an inlay. So they will be, so the first run won't be that, but eventually there will be inlay versions that will have mammoth ivory, walrus, walrus ivory, all that kind of cool stuff. Mammoth tooth, maybe.
Mammoth tooth. Yeah. Yes. Bring it. We're here for it. Mike Wertin of Northern Knives and Three Dog Knife. Thank you so much for coming on the Knife Junkie podcast. It's been a real pleasure, especially considering most of our interaction besides that one time have just been in comments, man. It's really nice to have you in front of me. And
I really appreciate it. Thank you very much.
All righty, man. Take care.
Yeah.
Want to sell your custom knives online? With LaunchCart, you can easily create your own e-commerce store. No coding required. LaunchCart is designed for knife makers like you, with built-in tools to showcase your craftsmanship, manage orders, and grow your brand. It's fast, flexible, and even includes low-cost payment processing to help you keep more of your profits. Start your online knife store today at TheKnifeJunkie.com/launch and turn your passion into a business.
There he goes, ladies and gentlemen, Mike Wertin of Northern Knives. And the disembodied voice you heard was Dakota, also a great guy. He's also helped out when Mike came on Thursday Night Knives. So Dakota, thank you also for being a part of this show. We greatly appreciate it. Someday I will make it up to Anchorage. Actually, I mentioned to my family before this interview that I was talking to someone in Anchorage, and we all decided that we want to go up sometime. So Alaska bound, we just might be. All right, for Jim working his magic behind the switcher, I'm Bob DeMarco saying, until next time, don't take dull for an answer.
Thanks for listening to the Knife Junkie podcast. If you enjoyed the show, please rate and review at reviewthepodcast.com. For show notes for today's episode, additional resources, and to listen to past episodes, visit our website, TheKnifeJunkie.com. You can also watch our latest videos on YouTube at TheKnifeJunkie.com/YouTube. Check out some great knife photos on TheKnifeJunkie.com/Instagram, and join our Facebook group at TheKnifeJunkie.com/Facebook. And if you have a question or comment, email them to bob@TheKnifeJunkie.com or call our 24/7 listener line at 724-466-4487, and you may hear your comment or question answered on an upcoming episode of the Knife Junkie podcast.